Good morning, everybody. I'm actually back in the UK today. I travelled overnight from France back to my home office, and this afternoon I'm going off to Germany to run a female conscious leadership session tomorrow in Stuttgart. So I'm all over Europe this week, which is quite nice. It's lovely to be jetting around, but I'm not sure if my old age can put up with the strenuous backwards and forwards mileage that I'm doing across Europe this week. We'll have to see. When I speak to you all on Friday, I'll let you know how I've got on with the travel. I'm Nicola Rowlett-Jones. I'm your host for today, and I'm a business consultant, executive coach, but I'm also a trustee of the Institute of Leadership and Management. And it's wonderful to have you here today, listening to our International Leadership Week sessions for International Leadership Week 2023. Now, today is very special because you're getting, in effect, you're getting two TILM trustees for the price of one. We're very, very lucky to have the chair of the Institute of Leadership and Management with us this morning. Good morning, Emrys. Before I formally introduce you, I'll just say good morning.
Morning. Thanks for having me.
So Emrys Green and I actually became trustees of the Institute at the same time. It's really interesting to be newbies together, as people say. And it's been wonderful working with him over the last, I think it's 4 years now, isn't it, Emrys? We're coming into our 5th year coming up, aren't we, soon?
Well, we're 3 years going into 4, actually, I'm afraid to say.
3 years.
It
No,
definitely
that's
feels
okay.
longer, doesn't it? Yeah. A lot of achieved in a short time. So, yeah.
It does, yeah. So 3 into 4, yeah. So it's been wonderful to get to know Emrys over that time. Actually, Emrys Green is the Director of Cloud Artisans, and that's a consultancy-led digital agency, an engagement agency. Now, he's actually a person that has got the most letters after his name that I know. Now, if you might want to have a look at Emrys's profile, but he's got an MBA from Nottingham Business School. He's the chair of the Institute of Leadership and Management. The letters galore. I'll let you have a look at his profile. But what drew me to wanting to talk to Emrys in this particular week was the theme of young leadership. And that's one of the themes that have been picked out by the Institute for this week, because he's a passionate advocate of all things development of young people as leaders. He's undertaken numerous research projects, he's designed training programs, he's the co-founder of Youth Voice and a leadership charity called Upstart Projects. And he's basically been a serial advisor and a judge for young enterprise for many years. So I thought I couldn't think of anybody better to speak to about leadership than Emrys. So Emrys, start off by telling us a little bit about what leadership means to you. You're the chair of the Institute of Leadership and Management. So tell us, what does leadership mean to you?
I think it's actually a very important question, because I think leadership needs to mean something a bit different to everybody themselves as individuals. So even though I'm going to sort of give you my answer now, I just sort of want to actually reflect that. Sometimes people go, oh, that's what it means. But yeah, I would like to highlight that it needs to mean something to your own circumstance and the way in which you work. And I'm saying all that because I'm going to say, for me, leadership is about cultivating great teams.
Okay.
That would be my sort of summary. Leadership is about cultivating great teams. And for me, I have the absolute pleasure of working across a whole variety of teams within our clients, with those we work with my own delivery team, of course, as well. And actually, how do you get the best out of those people that you're working with as various stakeholders? So can you ensure you're meeting your objectives? Can you set those objectives? Actually, can you find the right approach and the appropriateness, perhaps, to change those objectives or the way in which the team is working or what you're working towards? Because the external environment changes. Indeed, the internal environment can change, especially as we've seen over the last couple of years. We've all had to adapt the way we work, the approach that we might take to projects, and the people that we're working with. How do we keep in touch with them? How do we ensure their well-being? How do we still cultivate a great team? So yeah, leadership for me is all about cultivating a great team, and that might be different for everyone in every situation.
That's a great point. We said yesterday that, we can't be leaders unless we have followers who are prepared to come with us, can we? So I think that's a wonderful thing. So if we take that point then of cultivating great teams, what's the importance of the young leader within that team? Or, how do young leaders come through and be part of great teams?
Well, yeah, actually, very great point. Because I would say one thing I would say is, particularly for young leaders, but leaders can be a whole number of things, in my opinion. And of course, the Institute is all about great leadership everywhere. And I very much take that to heart, in that it's not just about the global footprint, it's about actually every stage in which you might be operating. And I'm saying all this because so I started out with a great participation consultancy, essentially a collection of the national charitable organisations in the UK, and was brought in as a young trainer, young associate. It was called Participation Works. But I actually made a point when we were going to be delivering that training, and that was mainly to local authorities and other organisations, about how they manage their stakeholders, about how they particularly engage young people, how they might create organisational change to enable the voices of young people to come through. But I always made the point that going to deliver these, that I would be the one that would stand up and give all the health and safety and toilet information and such like. And it seems like a really minor point, and I say that because as a young leader on that day, leading a training program, albeit with an experienced adult who might be sort of 10, 20, 30 odd years older than me, but it always, for some reason, took those people that we were training, almost entirely adults, off guard. They didn't expect this teenager stood in front of them to suddenly be talking to them about health and safety. And so it partly it's about changing perceptions, or showing what, not necessarily what people can do, but actually going, oh, okay, they're not just here. They're not just going to talk about TikTok, in a slightly bring it a bit more up to date. There's so much more to young people and young leaders than might meet the eye, or what might perhaps be perceived in the media and such like as well. So for me, that's a real key thing to acknowledge. I think that young leaders bring a whole vast experience to a program, and therefore changing perceptions is a key point.
But that's interesting, isn't it? That you used something so sort of standard and part of, some might say a boring topic. I wouldn't, forgive me if I'm offending any of our listeners there by saying that, but a quite sort of dry topic, let's call it that, a dry topic. And as a young person, you felt it was important. So you really did change a paradigm there. Is that something that you feel young people should have to do, or is it something that gives them greater impact?
I mean, should they have to do it? Absolutely not. We should all be going into a room thinking about, okay, we have a diverse team here. In all of its guises, including backgrounds and experiences. And a young person isn't just about their age, but actually about their contemporary experience of society at that point in time. And that should be a valuable part of any team. So they shouldn't have to do it, but the fact that they do it does, I believe, in some cases, increase their impact and influence, because actually there's a level of, oh, I can take you seriously now. You sort of commented around the letters there, and there's a few more that I don't ever sort of publish myself. I do know several people with quite a lot more, but actually for me, initially as a young leader, for example, when I joined the Institute over 10 years ago, actually for me that was about a level of professional recognition, and about well, for want of a better phrase, to be taken seriously, in the projects I was managing, in the teams I was developing and leading, that actually being able to become a member of the Institute in particular was really vital. And so both the personal development side, this is not a sales point for the Institute, although it's so natural to fall into, but there is the personal development side, but it was also essentially the post-noms, that Emrys Green as I was, back there, just that instant recognition in a way when you're on an email or before you meet someone, oh, okay, there's something there, or that's the sort of vibe. They've committed to their personal development. They have a level of professional recognition. They commit to certain standards, and that's sort of important to ensure that actually, I could walk into a room to be taken that little bit more seriously. Sometimes until they met me and they go, oh, well, he's a kid, essentially, would be some viewpoints in some of the work I was doing, until we then get into the conversation and you would listen and then start to give that input, and people, very quite quickly, for me, I think on the whole, would take that on board and, become part of that team conversation and an equal peer, essentially. And for me, that is especially important in today's world, because we've just gone through this whole period that for young people have been isolated in many ways, haven't had that broader range of experiences. I was doing mock interviews with year 10s last Friday, and what some of them were, a couple of them were just sort of going, oh, I've done this, does this count? It's like, yeah, and you talk to them about actually what is it they have been able to do, even if it was during COVID and it's from home, but how have you engaged with teams? How have you, even if it is leading a team on a multiplayer video game, of some sort, actually you start to think about, well, what are those transferable skills that you are developing out of there? So showing that you have some experience or developing it in the ways that you can, and then becoming an equal peer in a conversation is vital. I was with my team yesterday. We were talking about objectives for the next few years. Our newest and youngest member of staff was absolutely fantastic in that objectives setting meeting, and essentially challenging ideas, coming up with suggestions and thoughts. This is a young person who, I'd like to think, going back to my first answer, that we've cultivated over the last year, and cultivating as part of that great team. But, we've got people around the table, all different ages. But he had absolutely brilliant input, and we all valued that input. We took it on board. We incorporated that within the organizational objectives. And that just, to me, sort of highlights that actually, it's not someone who's been in business for 20 odd years. You can have someone who's been to uni, come out of uni, been sort of locked down, locked away, so to speak, during COVID and things, that can come out and flourish with that right support and encouragement. So treating, in that particular case, this great young man in the team as a peer, as an equal in that objective setting. He, may be junior member of the team, but equally as valuable as anybody else sat there, especially including myself.
Well, I find this is a point, you and I talk about this all the time. I'm a governor of a school here in Cardiff. I'm at primary school, actually, because I wanted to sort of help influence young people. And I also employ a number of young people. And I always say that one of the best things is getting that completely new perspective. I mean, I always use the example of tech. I think of the old ways that I do things. And one of, Caitlin particularly is on the call today. She'll come along and say, yeah, but there's an app for that. And if you do that like this, and if you do like that, you can get this done twice as quick, Nicola. Okay, great. I love that. Thank you very much. So not only do they bring, a different perspective in terms of thinking, they also, as you said earlier, have different experiences when it comes to things like technology, which give us the old, I count myself in the older generation, not you, Emrys, I'm talking about myself here. But it keeps me up to date with some of the more sort of more modern, efficient ways of maybe doing some of the things that we've done. What do you think are I want to say, why is it important that you and I obviously think it's important, but what would you say to other people listening to the call about the importance of having young leaders in our society? Because you talk about interviewing young people at schools. We have a Senate in our primary school, which is a parliament for those not in Wales, and they have their own parliament and they have their own eco teams, and that they're developing as leaders. Why do we think that's important for society as a whole, to have these young leaders be developed?
So I think it goes back to my point around the having those diverse teams. And actually, it's about that diverse society. It's about actually how do we engage those young people and how do they push forward with identifying those new technologies, those new ways of working, the new ideas, the new concepts. So absolutely, it wouldn't be unsurprising to hear, I was a member of the UK Youth Parliament when I was a teenager, that sort of thing as well, and involved there. And it's something that we advocate for a lot through the charity I work with, Upstart Projects, as well. Actually bringing young people in to give that space and opportunity. For them, it's important because it's providing that development. And the whole adage is, as you well know, around going for a job and then being told you don't have enough experience for the job, but then if you're not being offered the opportunity, you're not getting the experience to begin with. Yep. So actually bringing people in and providing those opportunities, whether it is volunteering, whether it is being part of a sort of a team-based sport, or being part of putting on a theatre production, or performing as part of a band, all these things that can help to bring those experiences, and so actually allowing space for young people to come through and do that sort of work, that's important for them, and then for society much more broadly. Seeing the new work or the new ideas that are coming through helps to elevate us all, helps to push us forward. And that's sort of why it's so important to have young leaders, I think, because it is that other perspective. And my charity runs youth voice training, for example, and one of the feedback we do get is actually just how amazing that viewpoint was, or the way you made me think. It doesn't all have to be about the epitome, about young people have to be involved in every aspect. One of the things we train on is that there's different levels that young people can be involved in a project or an organization at any one time, basically. So actually, whether they are out there flyering or advocating and supporting a particular event or activity, or or being consulted on how this new cafe might look or something, or being a trustee and sitting on the board. Each level is applicable. And actually for society, they're then benefiting from that experience and that perspective at any of those levels. So whether that is in the board conversation, or whether that is about reaching out and attracting in the audiences at like a marketing level, the flyering I gave, or if you're sort of involved in a consultation about a new cafe, well, that's all about product development. So actually you're hearing from young people, you are being able to adjust your services, adjust who you are, what you're doing, perhaps to meet the needs of your whole community. And the other thing is to highlight actually, that we sort of discuss in that particular training, for example, but it's not that young people are, that is it. There's various participation models and methods and things, but for me, it is about that having that team where it's co-production is the oft-used word, but actually young people and adults or the experienced professionals are sitting there together, making those decisions, investigating the information, bringing that, and as I say, having that impact together. It's not saying, we've got to involve young people now, we've got to do everything that they say. It's actually not that. It's about bringing that diverse team together, bringing the perspectives, and enabling that conversation to happen. Something from a young leader's perspective in the community, take a youth work style example, an old way of looking at it we found perhaps sometimes was, if you ask young people what they want, they'll just say all of this. They want 10 PS5s in their youth club, they want snooker tables, they want all of these things. But actually, if you were to say to them, okay, we've got £2,000 to do this youth club up, for example, what is it that you would want to see there? What could we do? And actually, they wouldn't be saying 5 PS5s and snooker tables and all these things. They would be right on there, going out into the town, looking online, getting a shopping list together, maximizing that £2,000 and getting the most they possibly could for all the young people that might use that space. So actually dismissing young people because they'll come up with all these great ideas but we could never do them. If you give the framework, that support and the parameters, actually, just like in any business decision, if you don't know those parameters, and I'm not saying don't think big, but actually, what are the parameters? What are we working to? They'll work hard to really get to there.
That's a brilliant starting practical tip. I was just about to ask you, hopefully inspiring people that are listening to think about their young people that surround them in whatever way, school, work, family, to inspire them to become a leader and become a great leader. That's a real practical tip, isn't it? Helping people with a proper framework. What was it? Henry Ford very famously said, if I'd asked people what they wanted and they said faster horses, they certainly wouldn't have said a car because they didn't know what a car was, and they did, so there was no framework for them to make that discovery. Thank you, Paul, for prompting a question. For the people listening, I'm going to ask Emrys this question, which is going to be practical, but after that, I'm going to open up to questions. So if you do want to ask a question, then just use your reaction button below. So my question is, that's a really practical tip, giving young people a framework in which to demonstrate their leadership potential, in which to demonstrate their leadership characteristics. I love that. What other couple of practical tips might we give people that are listening who want to help somebody that they know become a young leader?
So I think the next bit is space. So if you're saying you've got the framework or the next one is space and the opportunity. You can't just go up to someone and say, right, be a young leader, tell me what you want, tell me how this project's going to work, whatever. You have to enable them the opportunity to go away and research, to look it up, to learn and develop those skills and the space to do that. So don't just employ them and expect them to be brilliant on day one. Employ them and go, right, hopefully through this week, you're going to do a few days of actual work and a day or two of personal development and learning the skills that you need there to be that young leader, to do the best that you can. Just like we all need CPD, but allowing that space and opportunity in there. So if you're thinking about productivity, that doesn't mean a young person's not being productive just because they need to spend some time researching and being the best that they can be at what you're asking. Provide them with space to do that.
Good. Okay. All right. So framework, space and opportunity. Anything else we can do to encourage our young leaders?
I think make it a normal. Do not put on your, if you're going to recruit new young people into your business or organizations, particularly as young leaders, don't go and put, must have 5 years experience, must have a degree in this or that. It really applies to bringing anybody on board, but make it clear what your culture is and who you're looking for. I personally hire for attitude and competency. Really don't mind whether you've got that from a degree or you've done an apprenticeship or you've just been hardworking for the last couple of years or something, or indeed you've just come out of school and you've been involved in a lot of clubs and other things. That would be a top tip. Don't exclude young people with your job description, basically. Otherwise you'll miss out on some great talent.
And diversity and thought-provoking questions. Okay, wonderful. I'm just going to pause for a moment to see if we've got any questions from the audience. Paul, I don't know if you want to come back. You had your hand up earlier. Any questions from anybody in the audience? I'll just sort of summarise whilst you're ruminating on questions, folks. So what we've heard today is about cultivating great teams. And that could be from anything from diverse thinking to age, to gender, to background, to experience, to social standing. Here's Paul. I knew if I gave him some time, he'd come back with a question. Right, Paul, I'm going to allow you to speak. Go ahead in a moment. Should be okay. There we go. Just unmute yourself. There you go. Morning, Paul.
Morning. Can you hear me okay?
We can indeed. Thank you.
Lovely, lovely. No, thanks for that, Emrys. Agree with many of your points, but one question I had was, what do you think about, certain experienced, seasoned leaders defaulting or deflecting a lot of their responsibility to ideas of the young? Because I think there's a fine balance between mentoring as well as like hiring right, giving them the space, the autonomy to develop as leaders. But sometimes there are certain situations where there's a lot of emphasis placed on valuing new perspectives, where we default to turning to younger people without actually being a seasoned, like being a mentor or being an experienced leader, because that's sometimes something they lack and they don't have the proper guidance. So what do you think about that?
So I absolutely agree that sometimes, that proper sort of guidance and support, whether that's through mentoring, coaching, or various guises that could be lacking. And I think it goes back to a little bit of what I mentioned earlier in terms of it's not, you don't view it as bringing a young person in and suddenly we have to do what they say. Actually, as a leader, as should we say, an experienced leader, perhaps the buck still stops with you. You're the one in charge in the organization. You should be working with those new perspectives, young perspectives, and listening to that and going. And this is partly about the parameter setting, even if it's sort of a bit afterwards, or that framework going, right, these are fantastic ideas. Now, how do we apply this to some sort of funnel or process to go, which aspect of that will work brilliantly, which bits might need to tweak or change? And it might be that the whole idea is fantastic and let's go with it, but it needs to have been happening through a conversation, through not bureaucracy. It's quite different to bureaucracy, but refining an idea and working with those. So you're not just deflecting back to, it was their idea and that hasn't really worked, has it? This new fad or whatever. But likewise, sometimes not everything works. And regardless of your age and experience, we've seen over the years, people make some terrible decisions. So, so I think you're right to say mentor and coach and support that, as well as the space to enable them there, is really key. And it's a collective decision. It's a team. It's value young leaders' opinions and ideas equally to those with experience. And between the two, hopefully, can come out with cracking ideas and ways to push an organization forward.
That's what you meant by co-creation. Got it. Okay.
Yes. Yeah.
Wonderful. Thank you. Great question, Paul. That's prompted a question from me actually now. Emrys, I think for me, there is a view that we don't often understand the strength of our character until we're going through something that's pretty tough. You know, when we're facing challenges, the best often comes out of our character, of our skills, of the way that we work and the way that we think. How can we as leaders make it safe, psychologically safe for young people to occasionally face adversity and occasionally get things wrong and fail? You know, there's a whole thing about failing well, but you know, many young people have not really faced adversity. Some have, obviously, which is awful, but you know, many of them haven't. So how do we as leaders make it safe for them to face adversity and to fail occasionally, so they learn, so they get greater skills, so they understand more about who they are?
Absolutely. The word actually I would use, and you pretty much used it a moment ago, is understanding. I would say I think it's about the culture that you set and establish within the team with that young person, whether that's as an individual or more broadly as a team, and going, you know, empowering them. That's one word we've not used yet actually today, but it's probably quite a key thing here. Empower them to make those sort of decisions, or to propose those sorts of decisions and come to you with them. Empower them to run with ideas and go with things, assuming you have provided some input, have that conversation about how best to make it work, and such as we were just saying with Paul, really, and then be understanding if it doesn't go right. I've certainly faced that, numerous occasions over the years where actually something's just not quite worked out how you all might have expected it to go, the young person, as well as yourself, and acknowledging that these things happen, acknowledging that sometimes something slips through the net, that we're all human, that we make those mistakes. And that the important thing is how we learn from that, and how we sort of interrogate, okay, so at what point, at what stage was it that maybe that wasn't quite the right call, or that occurred? What mitigation can we put in future? I have occasionally had, I thought you'd be really angry about that. And I'm like, no, well, no, life happens. Let's try not to let it happen again. But actually, why did it happen? How can we support that? And more often than not, it's because I've failed at something. I've not provided that appropriate input, or I've gone, oh yeah, that looks great. Yep, go with that. And actually, maybe without putting that sort of time and energy into discussing the idea that little bit more or something. So it's not about them failing. It's about the leader maybe failing a little bit as well. But you're failing together, and you can learn together from that.
Okay, Gina, I'm really sorry, but today I have to close us at 9 o'clock because I've got another call I've got to go on. If you'd like to message me and Emrys, we'll answer your questions, and we'll put that in the group so everybody can hear that answer. But I am really sorry, folks. We've had so many wonderful comments here from Emrys. Hopefully you'll join me. I'm going to do a physical round of applause, but hopefully you'll join me in a virtual round of applause. Thank you, Emrys, as always. Some amazing nuggets there. I love the co-production. I love the framework, the space, the opportunity, making it normal, and I love the cultivating great teams. Now, we're not here tomorrow. I'm in Stuttgart. For those of you who arrived a bit late, I'm going to Germany to do a female conscious leadership workshop tomorrow. So there's no session tomorrow at 8:30, but we're back with absolute energy and a vengeance on Friday, where we are talking about female conscious leadership. Conscious leadership, female and male conscious leadership, both genders, all the genders. Let's say it that way. We're talking about conscious leadership on Friday, and that's at 8:30 here on LinkedIn Live Audio. I hope you can join us then. But once again, may I thank you, Emrys, for a wonderful session this morning. It's always a pleasure. We always have a giggle when we chat, and there's always so much that I learn from you. And I'm in awe of you as a young leader. You're still a young leader. Am I allowed to say that? Are you still young? Are you still classed as young?
I mean, I lost my young person's rail card last year, so that's my tipping point.
Okay, then. Maybe we can't call you middle-aged either, because you're not middle-aged. So we'll have to find a new term for you. But thank you, everybody, for listening this morning, and have a fantastic day. See you soon. Bye.